Welcome to American Catechism and Stab the Dragon Productions on the day after Patriots' Day, the day of remembrance, 9/11, for an unofficial holiday. Coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas on September 12th, 2025. It is currently 94 degrees as summer seems to have returned. Today I will speak briefly about 9/11, the War on Terror, and its background over the past 1,300 years, and try to make some application. And we will be drinking a patriotic whiskey, Soldier Valley Bourbon. Now this video got delayed because of the assassination of, the martyrdom of, Christian evangelist and apologist, conservative political activist Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA in Orem, Utah on the 10th. I just was in no way able to do a video yesterday, and in fact, still pretty shaky today. I'll have more to say about Charlie Kirk later. Just the facts. Patriots' Day, or Remembrance Day, is not an official federal holiday. It is commonly practiced as a day of solemn remembrance, a time of remembering the attacks on 9/11/01 in New York City, Washington, D.C., and the fields in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. On that day, 24 years ago, 2,996 people died, not counting the 19 Muslim terrorists. And it started a 20-year-long war with Iraq and Afghanistan that we ultimately lost. Caution. What I say in this video today may irritate a few, could get me kicked off YouTube, but not Rumble, and Facebook, and will be considered offensive by some. So listen at your own risk. I don't consider this to be hate speech. I consider this to be historically based, factual, and then with some of my interpretation of history and theology and the current situation. First, why did Osama bin Laden attack the U.S.? This is the recent past. Osama bin Laden had issued two statements in 1996 and 98 detailing his grievances against the United States and providing the basis for the attack. The U.S. had supported Israel and backed them in suppressing the Palestinians in the Second Intifada of 2000, but also the war against Somalia back in 1993, the war against Saddam Hussein back in 91, where we had troops in Saudi Arabia. We gave support to Saudi Arabia, as well as a host of other reasons. President George W. Bush did get it partially right when he said, "They hate us for our freedoms." It is my contention that the Muslim world has been at war with the Christian West since the 7th century. In short, bin Laden attacked us because we are not Muslim, and their religion requires them to wage war against non-Muslims. What is our response? What was our response? After the attacks, there was an immediate surge of patriotism all across the country. People flying American flags at their homes and from their cars, holding prayer services, etc. But I remember seeing some videos of a few Muslim enclaves in some American cities where people were rejoicing. There was some symbolic hugging and banding together of Republican and Democrat members of Congress, and that lasted about 2 weeks. Then the internal divisions started up again with the news media leading the charge. The news media, Democrats, and college professors immediately began blaming the attacks on America, saying we deserved it. We have been oppressing Muslims all these years. We got what we deserved. Warnings against Islamophobia were issued almost immediately. Oh, don't y'all hold Muslims accountable. Don't pick on Muslims. Most people did support the sending of the Green Berets and the special operators into Afghanistan as Operation Enduring Freedom began on October 7th. The movie 12 Strong gives an excellent account of those early days of that operation. Of course, it's been Hollywooded up quite a bit. But with the March 2003 unnecessary invasion of Iraq, the gloves came off of the American political scene and with the media. For the rest of the Bush presidency, the bitter partisan battles and news media were that they were unrelenting in their criticisms and their lack of support and their disunity. And America then tried to fight another war while being deeply divided at home, just like the Vietnam War. Nation building. The war aims of capturing bin Laden and dismantling al-Qaeda quickly morphed into nation building. But then, through gross mismanagement, the Iraqi insurrection began, and the initial easy victory was exchanged for a long, drawn-out warfare in the mountains of Afghanistan and the urban centers of Iraq. While commanding generals came and went throughout the 20-year war, no general was ever relieved of duty for cause, no Secretary of Defense was fired, no one was held accountable. The idea behind nation building is a long-standing American ideal based on the post-World War II experience, which had some success, and then again in Korea, but failed utterly in Vietnam. The goal was surround Iran with two strong pro-West democracies in Iraq and Afghanistan, both of whom had prior very positive experience with being modernized, being westernized in the 50s through the early 70s. But the Iranian Revolution in the late 1970s in Iran radicalized the entire Muslim world. Nation building post 9/11 had very limited effect in Iraq and almost zero effect in Afghanistan. Our leaders, notably President Bush, failed to understand the religious roots of the war, and President Obama shared some of the religious roots of that war. But by and large, Americans do not understand Islam, and American leaders did not understand Islam. President Obama, in fact, pulled troops out of Iraq too soon, and this allowed a space for ISIS to grow and flourish. The horrors of the reign of ISIS should have shocked the American public into understanding the true nature of our enemies, the nature of Islam, Islam unmasked. But even that didn't happen. And Obama set about increasing the amount of immigration from places like Somalia and Pakistan. More Muslims entered the country. Obama, in many statements, let us know that he had been raised as a Muslim, still had Muslim sympathies, despite trying to pass himself off as a Christian, and he believed that Muslims were part of the foundation of America. After 9/11, the Democrats and media had led a campaign against Islamophobia in America, as I mentioned earlier, and the American people were again led to blame the attacks of 9/11 on ourselves, on the West, and constantly pointing to, oh, the Crusades of the Middle Ages. That's why this is happening. The Crusades were evil. They don't understand a clue about the Crusades. Islam started in Saudi Arabia. The rest of the Middle East, Turkey, North Africa, all were Christian. How did they become Muslim? Because Islam spreads by the power of the sword. And so to blame everything on the Crusades is a gross misreading of medieval history. And doing that shows that Western thought is filled with angst over our past and white European guilt, false guilt. In short, Christian white men of European descent become the scapegoat and the source of all evil in the world. But peaceful Muslims were the good guys. Americans' views of Islam gradually became more and more positive, and in the Obama years, immigration continued to increase. And after 9/11, President Bush called for a crusade against terror, a war on terror. But he used the term crusade, and that should have been amplified. That should have been understood and explained properly. But he never completely identified the enemy. It's a war on terror. Didn't examine the historical evidence for the aggression of Islam over 1,300 years. Failure to identify your enemy, to name your enemy, to understand your enemy, that's a recipe for a tragic disaster. And that is, in fact, what happened. Because America and Western Europe had been led for many decades by elites who had no idea of religion or of history, there was a complete failure to understand the nature of Islam, even to the point of inviting millions more Muslims to live in Western Europe and America. The elites tend towards atheism and are usually thinking all religions are the same, and therefore they don't see the huge differences between Islam and Christianity, forgetting that our Western way of government is a product of the Christian worldview, not the Islamic worldview. The suicidal desire for diversity and multiculturalism, combined with declining church attendance and poor education in history and religion, brought us to this point of being humbled on the battlefields of Afghanistan by a bunch of goat herders who just happened to sincerely believe in their view of God and the world. True believers going against a bunch of postmodern, narcissistic, hedonistic, self-loathing Westerners was not a winning combination for America. Throughout all these years of war, the soldiers, Marines, sailors, the SEALs, the pilots, the crews, the airmen, they all perfected the art of war and served courageously, honorably, and with excellence, only to be betrayed by their generals, admirals, and politicians. The American public keeps on electing these kinds of politicians. The American news media keeps leading people astray. The American education system keeps not educating people, miseducating people. And America's preachers, pastors, and theologians fail to warn their congregations of the dangers of Islam and the lies of our leaders. Islam has consistently taught for 1,300 years to strike and attack the Jews and Christians. Islam did not peacefully spread by sending out missionaries, building orphanages and hospitals, and feeding the hungry. Islam has always been spread by the sword. They conquered their way from Arabia to Turkey and all the Levant, all of North Africa, all of Spain, and into France. These days, Islam is conquering through asymmetrical warfare, utilizing the weaknesses of the West to invade through immigration and then out-reproduce white people who have largely forsaken Christianity. When a people have no transcendent vision, no faith in God, they will tend to focus on themselves and pleasure and not reproduce. Rather, they enjoy this carefree, hedonistic lifestyle. Just look at the birth rates between liberals in America and conservatives. The elites see that declining birth rate all across Europe and in America and say, well, we need to import herds of Muslims to be workers who will support the social welfare system. How's that working out for you, Europe? England? France? Scotland? And it is not merely a pragmatic thing with the elites. The elites truly believe in diversity and in purging whiteness and eliminating the Christian faith. So they import Muslims, the opposite of the Christian faith. In short, the attacks of 9/11 were successful in dragging us into a long war that we had not the will to win. It caused us to grow weary and in debt, while all the time they were slipping into our system legally through immigration and then illegally through the Biden border fiasco, all in the name of diversity. We have utterly forgotten 9/11. We have abandoned our dead and our wounded and all those who served in that misbegotten war. We learned nothing from Vietnam, and we've learned nothing from 9/11, and we've learned nothing from the 20 years of war that followed. Where to from here? Step one is always to turn away from our sins, to repent and follow Jesus. This nation might be on the cusp of a religious revival. There are clear indicators of that all across the land, even in England and some other places in Europe. It has been our unbelief, our falling away from the true Christian faith, that has brought this plague of Saracens into our land. Step two is to right our capsized political, military, and economic ship, and I believe the Trump administration is doing that. But this needs to be carried through to the states and cities. Step three, we must end all immigration from Muslim lands and other non-Western, non-Christian countries that do not share our values. You import the third world, you become the third world. When you find yourself in a hole, the first step, stop digging. Step 4 is to correct our education system. Trump is working on some of that at the federal level, but states and local ISDs need to join in. Teaching proper American history, patriotism, and civics is a must. Enough of this multicultural social studies crap. A good understanding of history will show us that wars that are not fought to the end or are fought half-heartedly with unclear objectives are costly and do not end well. World War I did not end well. It was a negotiated truce. It ended in an uncertain way, and now 10, 20 years later, had to start going back into Germany with World War II. Korea ended in an uncertain truce, and now the North Koreans have nukes. Vietnam was lost and the commies took over. But strangely now, Vietnam and the US are becoming friends because Vietnam and China are enemies. Gulf War I ended with a truce and Saddam Hussein was left in charge. The issues were not resolved, so 10 years later, we go back in. Afghanistan, similarly, we fought there for 20 years until we just got tired. We had lost clear sight of our goals, and we didn't even know who the enemy was. And so we quit. We came back home, and the Taliban is still in charge. The real enemy for the past 1,300 years has been Islam. Islam and communism in the last 100 years, must be isolated and fought against in similar ways, not welcomed in for the goals of diversity. Step 5. This is for the church. Here I am speaking as a lifelong Southern Baptist, a seminary graduate. I pastored a Baptist church for 15 years, so I'm speaking as an insider. The church is inward gazing. It has become almost useless in real life. Oh, we have sound doctrine. We make good efforts at missions and evangelism, but we do not recognize nor name, let alone fight back against our mortal enemies of communism and Islam. Oh, that's in the political realm. We don't touch that. I actually heard an elder welcome in the illegal immigrants, saying, oh, it's just another opportunity to share the gospel. Our congregations will be guided by the left and the mainstream media to blindly accept massive immigration of those who are diametrically opposed to the faith of our fathers. We will welcome in people who will murder our people, who will rape our daughters and wives, and not do anything about it. Maybe, perhaps, here's an application. On the Sunday nearest 9/11, we should have a solemn day of remembrance in the church and teach and preach about the evils of Sharia law and the false god of Islam. Anytime you lose a war, it calls for some serious reflection on the causes and purposes of the war, the strategy used in fighting the war, and then tally the cost. Was the war worth it? Were our goals realistic? Did our goals change? Was our strategy poor? Were there leadership failures? If so, were they held accountable? What is our understanding of Islam and its 1,300-year history? Are the answers currently being offered by the elites? Are their answers adequate to explain the history, to prepare for the future? I think not. In conclusion, 9/11 ought to be burned into our memories. It ought to be remembered annually in the church, in the schools, in the nation. And in conclusion, I will also point out this whiskey. I will do perhaps a review, an in-depth review of this later. But sadly, this distillery in Omaha, Nebraska has closed permanently, so there will be no more of this bourbon. That being said, the bourbon itself is a bit of a mystery. Simply does not match what I saw advertised and recommended in the news articles that I read about that place. They closed rather suddenly, so I don't know. Well, for American Catechism, this is Stab the Dragon, in hoc signo vinces, out here.